Jack Reynolds froze as the study lights flickered on. Richard Harrison stood in the doorway, his expensive suit a stark contrast to Jack's worn jacket. The backpack containing evidence of Richard's embezzlement felt suddenly heavy on Jack's shoulders. Breaking and entering is a serious crime, Richard noted coldly, eyes fixed on the backpack, especially when it involves theft. Not theft when it belongs to Tori, Jack countered. Calculating his odds against the armed security outside, Richard's smile was predatory. Did she tell you about the clause in her father's will? She loses everything if she remarries without approval? Jack's mind raced. Surrender the documents, and Tori would lose her daughter and company. Fight. And he might not make it out at all. Then came the distant wail of sirens. That'll be the sheriff, Jack said calmly. Anonymous tip about suspicious activity should make for an interesting conversation. Shum, Richard's composed facade cracked, revealing the rage beneath. If you enjoyed this sneak peek, don't forget to like and subscribe for more heartwarming stories about unexpected connections and second chances at love. Hit that notification bell to never miss our newest uploads. Jack Reynolds wiped the grease from his calloused hands with a rag that had seen better days. The scent of motor oil and metal clung to his flannel shirt, a smell that had become as much a part of him as the scars on his palms. Shadows lengthened across the concrete floor of Reynolds Auto Repair as the day's last light filtered through the high windows. Another day, another dozen engines fixed, another stack of bills barely covered. He glanced at the clock mounted above the workbench, 7:15 p.m. Damn it, he was late picking up Tyler again. Closing up, Pete, he called to his only employee, a retired mechanic who worked part-time because, as he put it, my wife can't stand me moping around the house. Go on, boss. Pete waved without looking up from the transmission he was reassembling. That boy of yours is waiting. Jack nodded, grabbing his worn leather jacket from the hook by the door. The autumn air bit at his skin as he stepped outside, the Montana evening already carrying winter's warning. Oak Ridge looked peaceful at this hour storefronts glowing amber against the approaching night, the distant silhouette of mountains standing sentinel over the small town. He climbed into his old Ford pickup, the engine protesting before rumbling to life. The truck had seen 15 harsh winters and showed every one of them, but Jack couldn't bring himself to replace it. Sarah had picked it out, back when they thought they had forever ahead of them, before the fire, before everything changed, pulling onto Main Street. Jack tapped his fingers against the steering wheel, mentally calculating how much was left in the checking account after paying the garage's insurance that morning. Tyler needed new winter boots, and the property tax bill was coming due. He'd make it work. He always did. The truck's headlights swept across Malone's gas station as Jack approached the edge of town. His foot eased off the accelerator, his firefighter's instinct for trouble still razor-sharp despite 5 years of civilian life. Something wasn't right. Under the harsh fluorescent lights of the gas station stood a woman, her blonde hair catching the light, her posture tense. Surrounding her were 4 men in leather jackets, their motorcycles parked in a semicircle that blocked her path to the convenience store. Even from a distance, Jack could read the seen predators circling prey. Damn it, he muttered, pulling into the station. He parked the truck at an angle that would give him quick access if things went south, his mind automatically falling into the tactical assessment patterns drilled into him through years of emergency response. 4 men, all solidly built. The largest had a snake tattoo curling up his neck, disappearing into his beard. The woman stood with her back to the ice machine, arms crossed, chin raised. She was scared but not showing it. Jack stepped out of his truck, rolling his shoulders to loosen the tension gathering there. He walked toward the store with casual purpose, as if he were just stopping for a soda after work. Come on, sweetheart, Snake Tattoo was saying, his voice carrying across the empty lot. We're just offering a little escort service. Pretty lady like you shouldn't be out alone after dark. I've already declined, repeatedly, the woman replied, her voice steady despite the circumstances. Now step aside. Jack could hear the underlying tremor in her words. She was good at hiding her fear, but it was there. One of the other men, shorter with a shaved head, Move closer. Ain't being very friendly. Are you? We don't like unfriendly. Jack cleared his throat loudly. Everything okay here? All heads turned toward him. The woman's eyes, startlingly blue even in the poor lighting, widened slightly. Private conversation, buddy, Snake Tattoo said, dismissing Jack with a glance. Move along. Jack stopped a few feet away, hands loose at his sides, weight balanced. At 6'2", with shoulders broadened by years of hauling fire hoses and victims from burning buildings. He wasn't easily intimidated. Ma'am, he directed his question to the woman. You need help. For a heartbeat, she hesitated, pride warring with practicality. Actually, yes, she finally said. These gentlemen were just leaving. Snake Tattoo turned fully toward Jack now. Sizing him up, Jack recognized the calculation in the man's eyes, determining if the potential fight was worth the trouble. This your boyfriend? He sneered at the woman. No, Jack answered before she could. Just someone who thinks 4 against 1 seems a little uneven. The tension crackled between them. Jack knew how this could go. He'd broken up enough bar fights during his firefighting days to recognize the precipice. But he also knew something else: bullies usually back down when challenged directly. Look, Jack continued, his voice calm but firm. Whatever's happening here, it's over. The lady's made her position clear. Snake Tattoo took a half step forward, but the bald man grabbed his arm. Not worth it. Viper, let's roll. Viper's jaw clenched, but after a moment, he nodded. Your lucky day, hero. He spat toward Jack. Then, to the woman, we'll see you around. Princess. The threat hung in the air as the 4 men returned to their motorcycles. Engines roared to life, and they peeled out of the gas station, spraying gravel in their wake. Jack waited until they disappeared down the highway before approaching the woman. Up close, he could see her more clearly expensive coat, designer purse clutched tightly in manicured hands, eyes that held both gratitude and wounded pride. Thank you, she said, her voice steadier now. That was uncomfortable. Jack nodded. You okay? I'm fine. She brushed invisible dirt from her sleeve, a gesture that seemed more about regaining composure than cleaning her coat. They just surprised me. My car broke down about a mile back, and I was trying to call for assistance when they arrived. Your car broke down. Jack glanced down the dark highway. You shouldn't be walking out here alone at night. These roads aren't safe. A smile flickered across her face. Yes, I'm getting that impression. I'm Jack Reynolds, he offered, extending his hand. I run the auto shop in town. She hesitated before taking his hand. Her grip was firmer than he expected. Victoria Montgomery. Everyone calls me Tori. Where were you headed? Tori. The Montgomery property off Pine Ridge Road. I know it, Jack interrupted. The Montgomery estate was legendary in Oak Ridge, a sprawling mansion built by some East Coast financial titan as a vacation home decades ago. Few locals had ever been inside. That's a good 10 miles from here. Tori sighed. I was using the navigation app, and it suggested a shortcut. Apparently not the wisest decision I've made today. Probably not, Jack agreed. He glanced at his watch. Tyler was waiting, but he couldn't leave this woman stranded. Look, I need to pick up my son, but I can give you a ride to your place after. Then tomorrow I can take a look at your car. Tori studied him, clearly weighing her options. I don't want to impose. It's not an imposition. It's what people do around here. Something in his straightforward offer seemed to resonate with her. She nodded. Thank you. I'd appreciate that. As they walked to his truck, Jack noticed how out of place she looked against the backdrop of the rundown gas station, like a diamond that had somehow fallen into an old toolbox. Whoever Victoria Montgomery was. She wasn't from Oak Ridge, and Jack had a feeling her car breaking down was just the beginning of her troubles. Tyler was sitting on the steps of the Hansons' porch, backpack at his feet, a book open on his lap. At 10 years old, he had Jack's dark hair and serious eyes, but his mother's gentle features. He looked up as the truck pulled into the driveway. surprise registering on his face when he spotted the passenger. "Sorry I'm late. Buddy," Jack called as he stepped out. Tyler closed his book and stood. "It's okay. Dad, Mrs. Hanson made lasagna." "This is Ms. Montgomery," Jack said as Tori joined them. "Her car broke down, and we're going to give her a ride home." Tyler studied the woman with undisguised curiosity. "You're staying at the big house on the hill, aren't you?" Tori smiled a genuine smile that softened her composed exterior. "I am. Have you been there?" Tyler shook his head. "Nobody from town goes there. Dad says it's like a castle." "I said no such thing," Jack protested, though he had indeed described it that way once. "Well, it is quite large," Tori admitted, "but not nearly as intimidating as people think." Mrs. Hanson appeared at the door, wiping her hands on a dish towel, after brief introductions and Jack's thanks for watching Tyler. They were back in the truck, heading toward Pine Ridge Road. Tyler peppered Tori with questions from the back seat. How long was she staying in Oak Ridge? Did she live in a big city? Did she have any kids with the unfiltered directness of childhood? To Jack's surprise, Tori answered each one patiently, revealing that she was here for a few weeks of quiet, that she did indeed live in Chicago, and that she had a daughter Emma's age. "Emma's with you at the house?" Tyler asked. "She is. Perhaps you could meet her sometime," Tori replied, then glanced quickly at Jack as if checking whether she'd overstepped. "That'd be cool," Tyler said before Jack could respond. "There aren't many kids my age in Oak Ridge." Jack caught Tori's eye and shrugged. "Sounds like that's settled." As they turned onto the private drive leading to the Montgomery estate, the change in atmosphere was palpable. Ancient oaks lined the winding road, their branches forming a canopy overhead. Through gaps in the trees, the main house came into view, a sprawling structure of stone and glass. Warm light glowing from within, Jack pulled up to the front entrance, unable to suppress a low whistle. Castle might have been an understatement. Tori's laugh was unexpected, a genuine sound that seemed to surprise even her. "It's absurd, I know. My father had a flair for the dramatic." Before Jack could respond, the front door flew open, and a small figure darted out. A little girl with blonde curls and Tori's blue eyes ran down the steps, followed more sedately by an older woman. "Mommy!" the girl cried, launching herself at Tori as she stepped from the truck. "You were gone forever. Martha let me stay up because you weren't answering your phone, and she got worried." Tori gathered her daughter close. "I'm sorry, sweetie. My phone died, and the car had a little problem." The girl pulled back, finally noticing Jack and Tyler. Her eyes widened. "Who are they?" "This is Mr. Reynolds and his son Tyler," Tori explained. "They very kindly gave me a ride home when our car broke down." "I'm Emma," the girl announced, stepping forward with the confidence of a child who had never known stranger danger. "I'm 7.5. Tyler climbed out of the truck, regarding Emma with the careful assessment of a boy who wasn't quite sure what to make of girls yet. "I'm 10, he offered. Emma brightened. "Do you like dinosaurs? I have a whole collection upstairs." Before Tyler could answer, the older woman, presumably Martha, joined them. "Ms. Montgomery, thank goodness. I was about to call the sheriff." "Everything's fine, Martha," Tori assured her. Then, turning to Jack, "Would you like to come in? It's the least I can do after you rescued me." Jack glanced at Tyler, who was already deep in conversation with Emma about the relative merits of Triceratops versus Tyrannosaurus rex. "We should probably get home. It's a school night." "Please, Dad." Tyler looked up, hope written across his face. "Just for a little bit." Jack hesitated. They were already past Tyler's usual bedtime, and he had an early start tomorrow. But something in his son's eager expression made him reconsider. It had been a long time since Tyler had looked that animated about anything. 20 minutes, he conceded. "Then we really do have to go." The interior of the Montgomery estate was even more impressive than its exterior soaring ceilings. Artwork that probably cost more than Jack's annual income. Furniture that looked too pristine to actually sit on. But what struck him most was how impersonal it felt, like an upscale hotel rather than a home. Emma immediately dragged Tyler upstairs to see her dinosaur collection, leaving the adults in the cavernous living room. Can I get you something to drink? Tori offered. Coffee, something stronger. Coffee would be great, Jack said, though what he really wanted was to ask what someone like Victoria Montgomery was doing in a place like Oak Ridge. As if reading his mind, Tori smiled. You're wondering why I'm here? Jack shrugged. Not my business. It's not exactly a secret. She gestured for him to follow her to the kitchen, where Martha was already preparing a pot of coffee. I needed somewhere quiet to think, away from Chicago. This house has been in my family for generations, though we rarely use it. Quiet is definitely what Oak Ridge does best, Jack said, leaning against the marble countertop. Not much else happening around here. Tori's smile turned wistful. That's precisely what I need right now. There was a story there, Jack could tell, but he didn't press. Everyone was entitled to their secrets. God knows he had enough of his own. Martha served coffee in delicate cups that probably cost more than Jack's truck, then discreetly disappeared to check on the children. For a moment, they sipped in companionable silence. You mentioned you run an auto shop, Tori finally said. Have you always been a mechanic? The question was innocent enough, but Jack felt the familiar tightness in his chest whenever his past came up. No, he said simply. I was a firefighter before that, for almost 12 years. Tori studied him over the rim of her cup. What made you change careers? Jack set his coffee down, choosing his words carefully. There was an incident. It didn't end well. Understanding flickered in Tori's eyes. She didn't push for details, which Jack appreciated. Instead, she said, it must have been difficult to start over. It was, Jack admitted. But sometimes starting over is the only option you've got. A faint smile touched Tori's lips. I'm beginning to understand that myself. Before Jack could respond, the sound of children's laughter echoed from upstairs, followed by the thunder of small feet on the staircase. Emma and Tyler burst into the kitchen, both talking at once. Mom, Tyler's never seen a real telescope before, Emma exclaimed. Dad, they have a telescope that can see Jupiter's moons, Tyler added, his eyes wide with excitement. And Emma says we can use it tonight. Jack and Tori exchanged glances. It's getting late. Buddy? Jack started. Please. Dad, Tyler pleaded. When are we ever going to get another chance to see Jupiter's moons? Jack looked to Tori, who smiled. The telescope is already set up in the observatory room upstairs, she said. It would only take a few minutes. Observatory room, Jack repeated with a chuckle. Of course there's an observatory room. 20 minutes stretched into an hour as the children led them to a glass-domed room on the third floor. The telescope was indeed impressive, not a toy but a serious instrument that Emma, to Jack's surprise, knew how to operate with practiced ease. My grandfather taught me, she explained as she adjusted the settings. He said every Montgomery should know how to navigate by the stars, just in case the financial system collapses. Jack raised an eyebrow at Tori, who shrugged. My father had unique concerns. As Emma helped Tyler look through the eyepiece, his face illuminated with wonder. Jack found himself watching Tori instead. In the dim light of the observatory, with her guard lowered, she looked younger, less polished, more real. Thank you for this, he said quietly. Tyler hasn't been this excited about anything in a long time. Tori's gaze met his. Emma, too. She hesitated, struggling with some changes in our lives. There was that story again, hovering unspoken between them. But before Jack could decide whether to inquire further, Tyler's exclamation broke the moment. Dad, I can see the moons, they're right there. Jack moved to join his son at the telescope, but not before noticing something shift in Tori's expression, a flicker of vulnerability quickly masked by her practiced composure. Whatever had brought Victoria Montgomery to Oak Ridge, Jack suspected it was more complicated than a simple need for quiet. The next morning, Jack dropped Tyler at school before driving out to where Tori had said her car broke down. The sleek black Audi stood out against the rugged Montana landscape like a penguin in a hayfield. Jack popped the hood, immediately spotting the issue, a loose connection to the battery, probably jostled free by the rough dirt road she'd been directed to by her navigation app. A simple fix, but it gave him an excuse to stop by the Montgomery estate again. He told himself it was just to make sure everything was okay after their encounter with the bikers. But he couldn't deny a curiosity about the woman who spoke of financial systems collapsing while serving coffee in cups worth more than his daily income. When he arrived at the estate, it was Emma who answered the door, her face lighting up when she saw him. "Mr. Reynolds, is Tyler with you?" "Not today, kiddo. He's at school. I fixed your mom's car and brought it back." Emma's expression fell momentarily before brightening again. "Mom's in her office doing boring work stuff. Want me to get her? That'd be great." Emma disappeared into the house, leaving Jack standing awkwardly in the grand foyer. He felt distinctly out of place in his work clothes, surrounded by marble floors and artwork that probably belonged in a museum. "She's coming," Emma announced as she reappeared. "Can I show you my dinosaurs while we wait? Tyler only saw my favorites last night." Before Jack could answer, Tori rounded the corner, her appearance a stark contrast to the previous evening. Gone was the casual sweater and jeans, replaced by a tailored business suit that screamed corporate power. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek bun, and she wore subtle makeup that enhanced her already striking features. "Jack," she said, surprise evident in her voice. "I wasn't expecting you." "I fixed your car," he replied, suddenly feeling every bit of grease under his fingernails. "Simple issue with the battery connection." "That's incredibly kind of you." Tori seemed genuinely flustered, which somehow made her more approachable despite the power suit. "You didn't have to do that. It's what people do around here." Jack repeated his words from the previous night, offering a small smile. Tori returned the smile, some of her professional veneer slipping. "Let me write you a check for the trouble." Jack shook his head. "No trouble. Took all of 5 minutes. At least let me pay for your time driving out there." "Tell you what," Jack said, surprising himself with what came next. "Tyler hasn't stopped talking about that telescope. Maybe we could bring dinner over one night this week, and the kids could stargaze again." The request hung in the air between them. Jack was already regretting it. They were from different worlds, and whatever had brought Tori to Oak Ridge was temporary. Getting Tyler attached to this place, to Emma, wasn't wise. But before he could backtrack, Tori nodded. "Emma would love that. So would I." "Great," Jack said, momentarily thrown by her easy acceptance. "How about Friday?" "Friday is perfect. Around 6. We'll be here." As Jack drove back to town, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just stepped onto a path that would lead somewhere unexpected. Victoria Montgomery was a puzzle, a high-powered businesswoman hiding away in a small Montana town, raising a daughter alone, with shadows in her eyes that spoke of troubles she wasn't sharing. But puzzles had always been Jack's weakness, even when he knew better than to try solving them. The dinner on Friday stretched into an evening of board games and stargazing, which led to a Saturday hike to the waterfall on the Montgomery property, which somehow resulted in a standing Sunday brunch arrangement. Before Jack realized what was happening, 2 weeks had passed, and the Montgomerys had become fixtures in their lives. Emma and Tyler were inseparable, bound by the instant friendship that only children can form. Tori gradually revealed more of herself. She was indeed a businesswoman, though she downplayed the extent of her success. Mentioning only that she worked in finance in Chicago, Jack shared small pieces of his own story, careful to avoid the darker corners. It was during their third Sunday brunch that the careful bubble they'd been living in burst. They were seated on the terrace overlooking the mountains, the autumn air crisp but pleasant in the sunshine. Martha had outdone herself with Belgian waffles and fresh fruit, and the children were debating the merits of maple syrup versus chocolate sauce with the seriousness of Supreme Court justices. The sound of tires on gravel drew their attention. A sleek black Range Rover pulled up the drive, its windows tinted dark enough to conceal whoever was inside. Jack noticed the immediate change in Tori's posture, spine stiffening, shoulders squaring, face settling into a neutral mask that revealed nothing of her thoughts. Emma, too, reacted, her animated chatter cutting off mid-sentence as she looked to her mother with questioning eyes. "Mommy," she asked, the single word carrying a weight of concern that no 7-year-old should have to bear. "It's all right, sweetheart," Tori said, her voice steady despite the tension radiating from her. "Why don't you take Tyler to show him your new books?" Emma hesitated, glancing between her mother and the vehicle. "Is it Daddy?" Tori nodded once, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Go on now. Everything's fine." As the children disappeared inside, Jack stood, uncertain of his role in whatever was about to unfold. "You should probably go too," Tori said quietly. Jack frowned. "Are you sure I can stick around if you need—" "No," she cut him off, her tone sharper than he'd ever heard it. Then, softer. "Please, Jack, this is, complicated," before he could respond. The driver's door of the Range Rover opened, and a man stepped out, even at a distance. His presence commanded attention, tall, impeccably dressed in a suit that probably cost more than Jack made in a month, with the confident bearing of someone used to getting his way. Richard Harrison had arrived in Oak Ridge. "Victoria," he called, striding toward the terrace with practiced ease. "Aren't you going to welcome me?" Tori stood, her composure firmly in place. "Richard, this is unexpected." "Is it?" His smile didn't reach his eyes as he climbed the steps to join them. "When my wife disappears to the family estate with my daughter, I think a visit is perfectly expected." "Ex-wife," Tori corrected, her voice cool. "As you well know." Richard's gaze shifted to Jack, dismissive yet calculating. "And who's this?" Jack straightened, extending his hand on reflex. "Jack Reynolds." Richard ignored the offered hand. "Victoria always did have a thing for local color." The implication hung in the air, deliberately insulting. Jack felt his jaw tighten but said nothing. This wasn't his fight, and escalating wouldn't help Tori. "Jack was just leaving," Tori said, her eyes pleading with him to understand for a moment. Jack considered refusing. Every instinct told him that leaving Tori alone with this man was a bad idea, but he had no right to insert himself into her personal affairs, especially when she was clearly asking him not to. "I'll get Tyler," he said finally. "Call me if you need anything." Richard's smirk widened at the exchange, as if Jack's departure confirmed his irrelevance. As Jack collected his confused son and drove down the winding drive, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just abandoned Tori to something worse than a few bikers at a gas station. 3 days passed without a word from the Montgomery estate. Jack threw himself into work at the garage, trying not to check his phone every hour. Tyler grew increasingly morose, asking daily when they could see Emma again. On the 4th day, Jack had just closed up shop when his phone finally buzzed with a text from an unfamiliar number. "Can we talk? I'll come to you." Tori Jack responded immediately with his address, then spent the next 30 minutes pacing his modest home, suddenly aware of every worn piece of furniture, every scuffed baseboard, every reminder that his world was nothing like hers. When her car pulled up, Jack was waiting on the porch. Tori stepped out looking exhausted, the carefully maintained facade cracked enough to show the strain beneath. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders, but the casual attire couldn't hide the tension in her movements. "Thanks for seeing me," she said as she climbed the steps. "Of course." Jack gestured to the porch swing. "Want to sit?" Tori nodded, settling onto the swing with a sigh that seemed to come from her very core. For a long moment, she said nothing, her gaze fixed on the darkening sky. "Richard wants me to return to Chicago," she finally said. "He's threatening to pursue full custody of Emma if I don't." Jack absorbed this, choosing his words carefully. "Can he do that?" "He can try." Tori's hands twisted in her lap. "Richard has connections, money, influence. He's not above using them to get what he wants, which is control." The word came out bitter. "Over me, over Emma, over the company." Jack frowned. "Your company?" Tori hesitated, then met his eyes directly. "Montgomery Investments. My father founded it. I've been CEO since his death 3 years ago." The revelation landed with the weight of a dropped anvil. Jack had known she was successful, but this was beyond what he'd imagined. Montgomery Investments was a financial powerhouse, its name frequently mentioned in the business segments of national news. "You're that Montgomery," he said, pieces clicking into place. Tori nodded, watching his reaction carefully. "I didn't mention it because, well, people tend to act differently when they know." "Like Richard," Jack suggested. A humorless laugh escaped her. "Richard married me because of it. The merger of two financial dynasties, as he called it. It wasn't until after we were married that I realized what he really wanted was control of my father's company. And now he's leveraging Emma to try to force me back. He knows I'll do anything to protect her." Tori's voice broke slightly. "I came to Oak Ridge to think, to plan my next move. I didn't expect to get stranded at a gas station and rescued by a small-town mechanic," Jack offered, trying to lighten the moment. It worked. Tori's smile was small but genuine. That and everything after. They sat in silence for a moment, the porch swing creaking gently. "Jack," Tori finally said, "these past weeks have been... I haven't felt this normal, this happy, in years." The admission hung between them, weighted with implications neither was ready to voice. "Richard noticed," she continued. "That's why he showed up unannounced. He saw the way Emma talked about Tyler, about you. He saw a threat." Jack considered this. "Is that what I am, a threat? To Richard's plans?" "Yes." Tori met his gaze directly. "To what he believes is the natural order of things, where people like him dictate the lives of everyone else." Jack leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "So what happens now?" "I don't know," Tori admitted. "Richard has returned to Chicago, but he made it clear this isn't over. He's given me a week to come to my senses, as he put it. And if you don't, then he'll use every weapon in his arsenal to take Emma." Tori's voice hardened. "Which is why I can't let this, whatever this is between us, continue." The words landed like a physical blow, though Jack had been half expecting them. He nodded slowly, not trusting himself to speak immediately. "I understand," he finally said. "You need to protect Emma." "It's not just that." Tori reached for his hand, her touch light but deliberate. "I need to protect you and Tyler, too. Richard doesn't play fair. Jack. He never has." Jack turned his hand to capture hers. "I've handled worse than Richard Harrison." "Have you?" Tori withdrew her hand gently. "He has resources you can't imagine. Connections that reach farther than you'd believe." "So that's it." Jack couldn't keep the edge from his voice. "You're just going to let him win. Let him control your life through fear." Tori stood abruptly, crossing to the porch railing. "You don't understand what he's capable of." "Then help me understand." Jack joined her at the railing, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're giving up without a fight." "I have fought," Tori snapped, anger flashing in her eyes. "For years, I've fought his manipulations, his undermining, his attempts to take what my father built. Do you know what it cost me? What it cost Emma?" Jack remained silent, recognizing the pain beneath her anger. "Emma had nightmares for months after the divorce," Tori continued, her voice softer now. "She'd wake up crying, terrified that her father would take her away from me, and now he's threatening to do exactly that." "I'm sorry," Jack said, meaning it, "but running away, isolating yourself, that's not a solution?" "No, it's not," Tori agreed, surprising him. "That's why I came to talk to you. I need to go back to Chicago, to face this head on. But I needed to explain first, to make sure you understood why." Jack studied her in the fading light, this woman who carried the weight of a financial empire on her shoulders while fighting for her daughter's security. He had misjudged her. She wasn't giving up. She was preparing for battle. "Will you come back?" he asked, the question escaping before he could reconsider it. Tori's smile was sad. "I don't know." It wasn't the answer he wanted, but it was honest. Jack appreciated that. "Tyler's going to miss Emma," he said, which was easier than admitting he would miss Tori. "She'll miss him too." Tori hesitated, then added, I'll miss you both. The admission hung in the space between them, fragile and significant. Jack wanted to bridge that space, to tell her that whatever she was facing, she didn't have to face it alone, but he knew better. This was her fight, and she needed to approach it on her terms. If you need anything, he offered instead. Anything at all. I know, Tori interrupted gently. And that means more than you can imagine. As she left, driving away down the quiet street, Jack remained on the porch long after her taillights had disappeared. The chill of the evening settled around him, but it was nothing compared to the coldness he felt at the thought of never seeing Victoria Montgomery again. 1 week stretched into 2, then 3. Jack threw himself into his work, spending longer hours at the garage to avoid returning to a house that felt emptier than it had before the Montgomerys entered their lives. Tyler grew increasingly withdrawn, his questions about Emma eventually tapering into resigned silence. It was during the 3rd week that Mike Donovan, Jack's former colleague from the fire department who had since joined the sheriff's office, stopped by the garage during lunch. "Got a minute?" Mike asked, leaning against the doorframe of Jack's office. Jack set down the invoices he'd been reviewing. "For you, always. What's up?" Mike closed the door behind him, his expression unusually serious. "Those bikers you had a run-in with at Malone's gas station a few weeks back, you remember them?" Jack's attention sharpened. "Hard to forget. Why, they're back in town. Spotted them at the motel on the edge of town yesterday." Mike crossed his arms. "Thought you should know, considering what happened last time." "I appreciate the heads up," Jack said, "but what's it got to do with me? The woman they were hassling is gone." Mike gave him a long look. "Is she—" Jack frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean there's a black Audi with Illinois plates parked at the Pinewood Motel, and a woman who looks an awful lot like Victoria Montgomery checked in yesterday evening." Mike raised an eyebrow. "Along with a little girl." Jack's pulse quickened. "Tori's back. Why wouldn't she go to the estate?" "That's the interesting part," Mike continued. "The estate has visitors. 3 security-looking types arrived yesterday morning. They've been coming and going from the property since—" "Richard," Jack muttered, the pieces falling into place. "He's looking for her." Mike nodded. "That'd be my guess. And if those bikers are working for him—" Jack was already reaching for his jacket. "I need to go." "Jack," Mike caught his arm. "Think this through. If Harrison is as connected as you say, charging in half-cocked isn't going to help anyone." "I'm not going to charge in," Jack assured him, though that had been exactly his intention. "But I need to warn Tori that those bikers are back, and that Richard might know she's returned to Oak Ridge." Mike released him with a sigh. "Be careful, and call me if things get dicey." The Pinewood Motel was a modest establishment on the outskirts of town, its glory days long past. Jack scanned the parking lot as he pulled in, relieved to see no sign of motorcycles. Tori's Audi was parked outside room 12 at the far end of the building. He approached cautiously, aware that his presence might draw unwanted attention if Richard's men were watching. Knocking softly, he called, "Tori, it's Jack." The door opened a crack, then wider as Tori recognized him. Her face was pale with fatigue, her hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail, but the relief in her eyes was unmistakable. "Jack," she breathed, pulling him inside quickly. "How did you find us?" "Small town," he replied, then noticed Emma asleep on one of the twin beds, clutching her stuffed dinosaur. He lowered his voice. "Are you okay?" Tori nodded, gesturing for him to sit at the small table by the window. "We're fine. Just tired." "What happened? Why are you hiding here instead of at the estate?" Tori's exhaustion was evident as she sank into the chair opposite him. "Richard happened. He's escalated things. How he's filed for emergency custody of Emma, claiming I'm mentally unstable and unfit to be CEO of Montgomery Investments." Tori's voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly. "He's convinced 2 board members to support him, claiming I've been making erratic decisions." Jack frowned. "What decisions?" "That's just it. There aren't any. I've been on a scheduled leave of absence, with my CFO handling day-to-day operations. But Richard has been planting seeds for months, suggesting I'm not coping well with my father's death, that I'm making emotional rather than rational choices. And people believe him. Some do. Richard can be very convincing when it serves his purposes. Tori rubbed her temples. I came back to gather some documents from the estate financial records my father kept that would prove Richard has been embezzling from client accounts. But someone tipped him off. The bikers, Jack said. They're back in town. Mike, a friend at the sheriff's office, thinks they might be working for Richard. Tori's face paled further. That confirms it. Then, they weren't random troublemakers that night at the gas station. Richard sent them to scare me back to Chicago. But you got away, Jack pointed out. Thanks to you, Tori managed a small smile, which I'm sure only infuriated him more. Jack leaned forward, his voice low. You can't stay here, Tori. If Richard's men are in town, this is the first place they'll look. I know, but I need those documents from the estate. Without them, I can't prove what Richard's been doing, and I might lose everything Montgomery Investments. My reputation, her voice broke. Emma, Jack thought quickly. What if I go Richard's men don't know me, and they won't be looking for a mechanic poking around? It's too dangerous, Tori protested. These aren't just hired muscle. Richard employs former military contractors for his security team. I was a firefighter for 12 years, Jack reminded her. I know how to handle myself in dangerous situations. Tori hesitated, clearly torn between necessity and concern. The documents are in my father's study, behind a painting of the Montana skyline. There's a safe. You're going to trust me with your safe combination, Jack interrupted, surprised. Tori met his gaze steadily. Yes, I am. The simple statement, laden with trust, hit Jack with unexpected force. This woman, who commanded a financial empire, was placing her future in his hands. Tell me what to do, he said. The plan was straightforward. Jack would go to the estate after dark, access the safe using the combination Tori had provided, and retrieve the documents. Meanwhile, Tori and Emma would relocate to Jack's house, where Tyler and Pete's wife, Margaret, were waiting. What wasn't straightforward was the execution. Jack approached the Montgomery estate cautiously, parking his truck half a mile down the road and proceeding on foot through the dense woods surrounding the property. The night was overcast, providing additional cover as he made his way toward the rear of the mansion. Two men patrolled the grounds, one near the front entrance, another circling the perimeter. Neither looked like the bikers from the gas station. These were professionals. Moving with the disciplined precision of trained security, Jack waited for the perimeter guard to pass, then slipped across the open lawn to the greenhouse Tori had mentioned. Using the key she'd provided, he let himself in, then accessed the connecting door to the main house. Inside, the mansion was eerily quiet. Jack moved silently through the kitchen, into the main hallway, and toward the staircase leading to the second floor. His firefighter training served him well. Years of navigating smoke-filled buildings had taught him to move with purpose but without noise. The study was at the end of the upstairs hallway, its double doors imposing in the dim light. Jack eased one open, wincing at the slight creak of hinges. The room beyond was a testament to old money leather-bound books lining the walls, a massive desk dominating the center, and various paintings depicting Montana landscapes. He located the one Tori had described, a sweeping vista of the Bitterroot Mountains at sunset. Behind it, as promised, was a wall safe. Jack entered the combination 32129. The safe opened with a soft click. Inside were several folders and a small leather case. Jack took everything, tucking them into the backpack he'd brought. As he was closing the safe, he heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps approaching the study. Jack quickly replaced the painting and ducked behind the massive desk just as the study door opened fully. Light from the hallway spilled in, followed by a man's silhouette. I know you're in here, came a smooth, cultured voice, Richard Harrison. Victoria always did have predictable hiding places. Jack remained motionless, weighing his options. The backpack with the documents was securely on his shoulders, but there was no clear exit route with Richard blocking the door. Did she send you? Richard continued, stepping further into the room. Or did you take it upon yourself to play hero again? Jack realized with a jolt that Richard knew exactly who was in the study. His cover was blown. I think it's time we had a proper conversation. Mr. Reynolds, Richard said, reaching for the light switch. Jack made his decision in an instant. As the lights came on, he rose from behind the desk, facing Richard directly. I was thinking the same thing, he said. Richard looked exactly as Jack remembered, expensively dressed, perfectly groomed, exuding the casual arrogance of a man accustomed to getting his way. But now there was something else in his expression: calculation. Breaking and entering is a serious crime, Richard noted, glancing pointedly at the backpack, especially when it involves theft. Not theft when it belongs to Tori, Jack countered. Richard's smile was cold. Ah, Tori. How intimate. Has she told you who she really is? What she's worth? She's told me enough. I doubt that. Richard moved to the bar cart in the corner, pouring himself a measure of amber liquid with deliberate slowness. Did she tell you about the clause in her father's will? The one that states she loses control of Montgomery Investments if she remarries without the board's approval? Jack kept his expression neutral, though the information was new to him. Sounds like a control mechanism. Sounds like prudent business, Richard corrected, sipping his drink. Old man Montgomery knew his daughter's weakness for, let's call it, charity cases. The insult was deliberate, designed to provoke. Jack refused to take the bait. What do you want? Harrison? Richard leaned against the bar, studying Jack with the detached interest of a scientist observing a specimen. Initially to reclaim what should have been mine. Montgomery Investments was supposed to be my company to run. Victoria was supposed to be the figurehead, the Montgomery name with my brains behind it. And now I want to ensure Victoria understands the consequences of defiance. Richard's voice hardened. Starting with taking Emma, then the company. I'll leave her with nothing. Why? Jack asked, genuinely perplexed by such deliberate cruelty. You've already got wealth, success. Why destroy Tori's life? Something dark flickered in Richard's eyes. Because she humiliated me. She walked away when no one walks away from Richard Harrison. In that moment, Jack understood what they were dealing with: not just a manipulative ex-husband, but a man whose ego had been wounded, whose sense of control had been challenged. Such men were unpredictable, dangerous. She has evidence of your embezzlement, Jack said, shifting the conversation. Documents that will end your career, possibly send you to prison. Richard's smile didn't waver, but his knuckles whitened around his glass. Documents that you're currently carrying, I presume. Jack didn't answer, which was answer enough. Here's what's going to happen, Richard said, setting down his glass. You're going to hand over that backpack, and then you're going to disappear from Victoria's life. In exchange, I won't press charges for breaking and entering, and I won't make things difficult for that boy of yours. The threat against Tyler sent a surge of cold anger through Jack. You stay away from my son. That depends entirely on you, Richard replied smoothly. The backpack, Mr. Reynolds. Jack weighed his options. He could attempt to fight his way past Richard, but the commotion would likely alert the security guards outside. He could surrender the documents, but that would leave Tori defenseless against Richard's machinations. Or he could try something else. You're right about one thing, Jack said slowly. Tori did tell me about you, about how you manipulate, threaten, and bully to get your way. Richard's smile tightened. Your point. My point is that men like you only understand one thing: leverage. Jack reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. While we've been talking, these documents have been scanning, page by page, and uploading to a secure server. Even if you take this backpack, the evidence is already beyond your reach. It was a bluff. The documents were still securely in the backpack, untouched. But Jack had spent enough time around desperate people to know how to make a lie convincing. Doubt crept into Richard's expression. You're lying. Jack held up the phone, showing the screen with its progress bar actually just his email opening. But Richard wouldn't know that from a distance. Am I want to risk it? For the first time, Uncertainty flickered across Richard's face. If you think... He was interrupted by the sound of sirens in the distance, growing steadily louder. That'll be the sheriff, Jack said calmly. Anonymous tip about suspicious activity at the Montgomery estate. Should make for an interesting conversation when they find us here. You with your hired security, me with evidence of your financial crimes. Richard's composure cracked. You idiot. You have no idea what you've done. Actually, I do, Jack replied. I've given Tori a fighting chance. That's all she ever needed. The sirens were very close now, blue and red lights visible through the study windows as vehicles pulled up the drive. Richard's face contorted with rage, but he was trapped if he attacked Jack now. It would only worsen his position when the sheriff arrived. This isn't over, he snarled. For tonight, it is, Jack replied, moving toward the door. I suggest you start practicing your explanation for why you have armed guards patrolling a property that isn't yours. As he stepped past Richard, Jack felt a moment of tension with the man lash out. Consequences be damned, but Richard remained frozen in place, his carefully constructed world beginning to crumble around him. Jack made his way downstairs just as Sheriff Tanner entered the foyer, flanked by 2 deputies and Mike Donovan. Mr. Reynolds. The sheriff greeted him with professional neutrality. Care to explain what you're doing here? Jack met Mike's gaze briefly, receiving a subtle nod of support. Just retrieving some documents for the property owner, Miss Montgomery. Her ex-husband and his security team have been occupying the estate without permission. Sheriff Tanner's eyebrows rose. Is that so, and where is Miss Montgomery now? Safe, Jack answered simply, and willing to press charges for trespassing, if necessary. The sheriff considered this, then nodded to his deputies. Secure the premises. I want to speak with everyone on the property. As the officers moved to carry out his orders, Mike stepped closer to Jack. You okay? He asked quietly. Jack nodded, the weight of the backpack and its contents a reassuring presence. I am now. Dawn was breaking as Jack finally returned home, exhaustion settling deep in his bones. The questioning at the sheriff's office had been lengthy, but ultimately productive. Richard's security team, faced with potential charges, had quickly distanced themselves from their employer, revealing they had been hired to monitor Victoria Montgomery's movements and retrieve stolen company property. Richard himself had maintained his composure, presenting himself as a concerned ex-husband looking out for his daughter's welfare. But the sheriff had been unimpressed, particularly when Tori arrived with her lawyer to formally accuse Richard of harassment and trespassing. The documents Jack had retrieved provided the final nail in the coffin, detailed records of financial transfers that, according to Tori's lawyer, showed clear evidence of embezzlement and fraud. Richard had left in the custody of his own legal team, his face a mask of controlled fury. Now, as Jack pulled into his driveway, all he wanted was to see that Tori and the children were safe, and then sleep for about 12 hours. The front door opened before he reached it. Tori stood in the doorway, still in the clothes she'd worn the previous day, her face etched with worry. You're okay, she breathed, relief washing over her features. I told you I would be, Jack replied, offering a tired smile. Tori stepped aside to let him enter. The house was quiet, Tyler and Emma presumably still asleep in Tyler's room, where Margaret had set up a makeshift bed on the floor for Emma. The documents, Tori asked as Jack set down the backpack. All here. The sheriff has copies now, and your lawyer has already started building a case against Richard. Jack sank onto the couch, the events of the night catching up with him all at once. It's not over, but Richard's on the defensive now. Tori joined him on the couch, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her presence. You risked everything for us. Jack shook his head. Not everything. Just did what needed doing. That's not how most people would see it. Tori's voice softened. Breaking into an estate occupied by armed security to retrieve documents for a woman you barely know. I know you well enough, Jack countered, turning to meet her gaze. I know you're strong, stubborn, and willing to sacrifice your own happiness to protect Emma. I know you love dinosaurs and astronomy, Because they connect you to your father. I know you pretend to like coffee black because you think it makes you seem tougher in the boardroom, but you actually prefer it with cream and too much sugar. A surprised laugh escaped Tori. How did you know that? Martha told me, Jack admitted with a grin. She says you've been ruining perfectly good coffee since you were 15. Tori's smile faded, replaced by something more serious. You know those things, yes, but there's so much you don't know about my world. Jack, the politics, the pressure, the constant scrutiny. So teach me, Jack said simply. If that's what you want, the directness of his response seemed to catch her off guard. Is that what you want, to enter that world? Jack considered the question carefully. What I want is to be with you and Emma. The rest is just geography and circumstance. Tori's breath caught for a long moment. She simply looked at him, as if seeing him properly for the first time. When I came to Oak Ridge, she finally said, I was running away. From Richard, from the pressure, from decisions I didn't want to make. I thought I needed quiet to figure things out. And did you figure things out? Tori reached for his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. Not in the way I expected. I thought I needed solitude, but what I really needed was perspective. I needed to remember what matters, and it isn't the company, or the power, or proving myself to the board. What matters? Jack asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. Family, Tori said softly. Love. Having people in your life who see you, really see you, and stay anyway. Jack squeezed her hand gently. I see you, Victoria Montgomery, and I'm not going anywhere. Tori leaned forward, closing the distance between them. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, then deepening with a certainty that took Jack's breath away when they finally pulled apart. Tori's eyes were bright with unshed tears. I don't know how this works, she admitted. My life is in Chicago, the company, Emma's school. We'll figure it out, Jack assured her. One step at a time. Tori nodded, settling against him as exhaustion finally claimed them both. There were still challenges ahead Richard wouldn't give up easily, and merging their two very different worlds would require patience and compromise. But as Jack held Tori close, listening to her breathing slow as she drifted to sleep, he knew with absolute certainty that whatever came next, they would face it together, in the quiet of the early morning, with the first rays of sunlight filtering through the windows. Jack Reynolds, the mechanic who had once walked into fire without hesitation, found himself stepping willingly into a different kind of unknown. And for the first time in years, he wasn't afraid of getting burned. 5 months later, Jack stood in the observatory room of the Montgomery estate, adjusting his tie as Tyler fidgeted beside him in a matching suit. Stop pulling at it, Jack admonished gently. It's just for a few hours. It's choking me, Tyler complained, though he obediently dropped his hands. Why do we have to dress up? It's just us and Emma and Tori. Jack smiled, glancing out the window at the small gathering on the lawn below. And about 50 of Tori's closest friends and business associates. And Richard, Tyler added, his expression darkening. Jack placed a hand on his son's shoulder. He's Emma's father. He has a right to be here. The past months had brought significant changes. Richard, facing mounting evidence of financial impropriety, had been forced to step down from his position at Harrison Financial. Criminal charges were still pending, but a plea deal was in the works, one that would keep him out of prison but permanently bar him from the financial industry. More surprisingly, once the threat to his reputation and freedom became real, Richard had become unexpectedly cooperative regarding Emma. The custody battle had been dropped, replaced by a reasonable visitation agreement that prioritized Emma's well-being. Tori had theorized that Richard, stripped of his professional power, was finally forced to reckon with what truly mattered in his life. Jack was less optimistic. He suspected Richard was simply cutting his losses and focusing on rebuilding his image. But whatever the reason, the result was positive for Emma, and that was all that mattered. It's time, Mike Donovan announced, appearing at the door in his own suit. They're ready for you downstairs. Jack nodded, giving Tyler a reassuring smile. Ready, buddy. Tyler straightened his shoulders, suddenly looking older than his 10 years. Ready, Dad? Abaikun. They made their way downstairs and through the house to the back terrace, where a white runner stretched across the lawn to a flower-covered arch. Guests sat in white chairs on either side of the aisle, turning to watch as Jack and Tyler took their places beneath the arch. The string quartet began playing, and all eyes turned toward the house. Emma appeared first, beaming in a pale blue dress, her blonde curls crowned with flowers as she scattered petals along the runner. And then, Tori emerged. She wore a simple white dress that caught the sunlight, her hair loose around her shoulders just as it had been the first night they spent talking in his garage. She carried a small bouquet of wildflowers, the same kind that grew along the riverside where they had taken the children hiking that first weekend. As she walked toward him, Jack felt a sense of absolute certainty wash over him. This woman, who commanded boardrooms and managed billions, who fought for her daughter with fierce determination, who had seen the value in a small-town mechanic with a complicated past, she was his future. When she reached him, taking his hands in hers, the rest of the world seemed to fade away. Hi, she whispered, her eyes bright with joy. Hi yourself, he replied. Unable to contain his smile, the officiant began the ceremony, but Jack barely heard the words. He was too caught up in the miracle of this moment, how a chance encounter at a gas station had led them here. How fate or luck or divine intervention had brought Victoria Montgomery into his life when neither of them was looking for love, when it came time for vows. Jack spoke from the heart, without notes or rehearsal. He promised to stand by her through whatever challenges arose, to love Emma as his own, to remember always that strength wasn't about facing life alone, but about choosing to face it together. Tori's vows were equally heartfelt, her voice steady as she promised to build a life that honored both their worlds, to create a home filled with stargazing and engine repair, board meetings and soccer practice, all the beautiful contradictions that made their relationship unique as they exchanged rings. Jack caught sight of Tyler and Emma standing together, their faces radiant with approval. Whatever doubts he might have had about blending their families had long since vanished, replaced by the certainty that these children, who had found each other through chance, were always meant to be siblings. By the power vested in me, the officiant concluded, I now pronounce you husband and wife. The guests applauded as Jack and Tori sealed their vows with a kiss, but to Jack, the only sound that mattered was Emma's delighted giggle and Tyler's enthusiastic, finally, later. As the reception stretched into evening and stars began appearing in the Montana sky, Jack found himself standing on the terrace, watching as Tori danced with Emma and Tyler. The sight of them together, his new family, filled him with a contentment he had thought lost forever after the fire that ended his firefighting career. Quite a change from fixing engines, came a voice beside him. Mike Donovan joined him at the railing, offering a glass of champagne. Jack accepted it with a smile. Some days I still can't believe it. You deserve this, Jack, Mike said seriously. After everything you've been through, you deserve to be happy. Jack's mind flashed briefly to the darkest period of his life, the nightmares, the guilt, the feeling that he would never be whole again. Then his gaze returned to Tori, laughing as she twirled Emma in a circle, and he knew that while the scars remained, they had become part of a larger story, one with a happier ending than he could have imagined. We all do, he replied, clinking his glass against Mike's. Every single one of us. As the night deepened, the children finally exhausted, Jack and Tori found themselves alone in the observatory room where their journey had truly begun. The telescope was positioned toward Jupiter, just as it had been that first night. Full circle, Tori noted, leaning into Jack's embrace as they gazed up through the glass dome at the star-filled sky. New beginning, Jack corrected gently, pressing a kiss to her temple. Tori turned in his arms, her expression thoughtful. When I came to Oak Ridge, I was lost, hiding. I never expected to find everything. That's usually how it works, Jack said with a smile. The best things in life are the ones you never see coming, like a stubborn mechanic who rescues you from bikers and then steals your heart, exactly like that, as they stood together beneath the stars, the mansion quiet around them. Jack Reynolds, once a firefighter, now a mechanic, husband, and father to a blended family that defied all expectations, felt the final pieces of his fractured life click into place. He had walked through fire and survived. He had faced loss and found love again. And now, with Tori by his side, he was ready for whatever adventures awaited them in Oak Ridge, in Chicago, and everywhere in between. Some men spent their lives searching for purpose. Jack had found his in the most unexpected place, a gas station on the edge of town, where a woman stood alone against threats she couldn't yet see, and he had made the simple choice to stop and help. Everything else, their love, their family, their future had flowed from that one moment of ordinary courage. And in the end, wasn't that what life was all about? The small choices that led to extraordinary outcomes? The everyday heroism of simply showing up, again and again, for the people you loved. As Tori raised her face to his for another kiss, Jack knew with absolute certainty that he would make that same choice 1,000 times over. Because some risks were worth taking, some battles worth fighting, and some loves like theirs worth everything.